Hello and welcome. Hope you all are fine, and in today's lecture we shall be talking about resource use and human societies. Today's lecture focuses on the historical developments to understand the natural environmental resources and social uses, analysis of resource use practices and their impacts on human societies, crisis of environmental resources, concept of resource conservation. Let's explain that human society's expansion has a close relationship with diverse resource use behaviors. Every significant stage in the development of human societies has witnessed the discovery and utilization of new resources as well as the adoption of methods that make it easier to harvest natural resources. In contrast to other animal species, man has a remarkable talent to creatively use the resources of nature. As a result, there are now linkages between human societies and environmental resources that depend on delicate balance and are prone to producing terrible outcomes in the event that either side commits excesses. Let us firstly talk about types of resources and social use. The natural resources on Earth have given rise to wide variety of living forms and have helped to establish an environmental system that is supported and is compatible with this diversity of life forms, making Earth a unique planet. The world has vast reserves of these natural resources, and as human cultures have developed, man has exploited different types of resources. In actuality, there has been a complicated interaction relationship between the growth and utilization of natural resources as well as human needs as they relate to different phases of culture. The range of natural resources has evolved over the duration of this interaction, and along with it, so has the relationship between man and his environment. The contemporary era enlarged this idea to embrace the entire natural environment, including all living and non-living things, as natural resources. However, a simplified classification of natural resources into categories of renewable and non-renewable resources has been established. The following subsections will go into more details about them. Firstly, let us talk about renewable resources. The term renewable resources refers to natural resources that have the capacity to regenerate. The majority of the resources that are renewable are living ones, including plants, forests, animals, etc. Due to their nearly limitless availability, they also include such natural resources as air, water, and solar energy. There are also some natural resources that have the ability to regenerate. However, it takes them a fair amount of time to do so. They are regarded as the least renewable or even non-renewable in the context of social usage of natural resources. The cycling time is the time required for replenishment. Resources with a short cycling time are replenishable, whereas those with a very prolonged cycling time are non-renewable. Human life has depended heavily on renewable natural resources for sustenance and future progress. Solar energy, water, air, plants, animals, and the landscape are the most easily recognizable natural resources with a significant capacity for regeneration. The trio of solar energy, water, and air has contributed in the emergence of human civilization as well as all other life forms and has contributed an immeasurable role in its continued development. Light and heat energy have contributed to the regulation of a climatic cycle, which is the basis for all vegetative growth and other support systems necessary for life. Since solar energy has been continuously and naturally available to humans, there is essentially no evidence of its social application. In actuality, human societies have known that sun is the most significant source of both light and heat from the beginning of the time. Given that it satisfies a number of the essential conditions for life on Earth, water is typically seen as a perennial natural resource. For a very long time, the expansion of human societies was dependent on availability of water in the environment. In fact, since a very early era in its history, human societies have managed water as one of those important resources. During this process, man realized early on how to transform non-used water into usable water. Water, as a natural resource, has also allowed man to generate energy and use it to power mechanical equipment. Indeed, the availability of water has been so abundant in nature that irresponsibility of its uses has crept into human behaviors. Plants and animals have been among the most important renewable resources. Man has survived on diet of animal meat and plant fruits since the dawn of time. The patterns of settlement and growth of human societies in different regions of the country has been determined by the availability of food in various metrics. Human communities learned and developed agriculture as well as semi-permanent and permanent settlements as habitats. The formation of community settlements was determined by favorable natural conditions for agriculture. These communities were built in response to special agricultural conditions. The human endeavor was to develop crops in order to maintain a consistent and adequate supply of seeds and to breed animals in order to keep their stock from dwindling. Agriculture quickly became a basic form of human activity, and land for agriculture became one of the fundamental resources. It provided food for humans and fodder for animals, as well as raw materials for ancillary activities like as clothing, shelter, and other agricultural activities. Agricultural resources were reliant on environmental conditions such as terrain, soils, and water supply, and were supplied on a regular basis through cropping activities. The landscapes occupied by agricultural communities underwent significant transformation, with the indigenous vegetation being completely replaced in numerous cases by crops farmed by human societies. Plants and animals have been some of the most important renewable resources. Man has survived on a food of animal meat and plant fruits since the dawn of time. The pattern of settlement and growth of human societies in different regions of the country has been determined by the availability of food in various metrics. The formation of community settlements was determined by favorable natural conditions for agriculture. These communities were built in response to special agricultural conditions. The human endeavor was to develop crops in order to maintain a consistent and adequate supply of seeds and to breed animals in order to keep their stock from dwindling. Agricultural resources were reliant on environmental variables such as terrain, soil, and water supply, and were supplied on a routine basis through cropping activity. This clearly has a significant impact on modern communities, with some going extinct as a result of their inability to adapt the changes. Agriculture transformed the human-nature relationship. Food resources were now assured, allowing societies to focus on other aspects of growth. The landscapes occupied by agricultural societies underwent significant alteration, with the native vegetation being completely replaced in numerous cases by crops farmed by human societies. Non-renewable resources. Some resources replenish themselves through extraordinarily slow natural cycles. For all practical purposes, such resources can thus be declared non-renewable. Metals, mineral resources, and soil have been the primary non-renewable resources used by human cultures since the beginning of time. Metals and minerals are sometimes found on or near the surface, but must otherwise be mined. Soil is generated over hundreds of years as a result of complex interplay between organisms and the Earth's physical surface. Climate also has an influence on soil formation. Metals and minerals are rarely found in their purest form in nature and are usually extracted in the form of ores from beneath the ground or from the hills. This necessitates the availability of knowledge as well as a certain level of extraction technology advancement. The rocks were maybe the first material that man harnessed for use in daily duties. This period, known as the Paleolithic epoch, was the longest in the evolution of human societies. The majority of the minerals that we have nowadays were found very recently in comparison to the time period occupied by the stone-using human societies. Metals were initially recognized as a resource by humans during the Chalcolithic period. Copper and bronze are the first examples of metal used by human societies. The use of metals was a key stage in the history of human cultures because it anticipated a slew of critical developments in succeeding times that transformed man's connection with the environment. One major attribute of metals is that their use does not result in significant depletion of their resources. Most of terrestrial life forms rely on soils for survival. Thus, the nature of soils has been linked to the growth of human societies. In some places, soils have supported crops and helped transform wandering human groups into settled societies, whereas in others, the less responsive nature of soils for vegetation and crop support has given rise to nomadic and non-sedentary societies. Soils are prone to eroding due to wind or rain. While agriculture has been viewed as the result of human societies by extensive use of soil resources, it has also resulted in the loss of natural plant cover, exposing the soil to erosion. In such circumstances, desert-like conditions spread and agricultural land begins to decrease at a variable rate. Soils have also degraded as a result of continuous human activity with no regard for maintaining regenerative lean times, which are critical for recovering fertile features. The grimness of the situation as a result of this degradation might be attributed to the fact that human settlements have been compelled to depart the area and migrate to other places. Humans have confronted the challenges of soil fertility loss since the dawn of time, and many remedies have been developed to address the issue. Resource use practices and their impact. The usage of the aforementioned natural resources has been essential to human existence and the growth of human societies. Over time, human societies developed many strategies for utilizing natural resources. These techniques differed from place to place and elicit many sub-processes that aided human societies in their subsequent evolution based on extended experience with resource usage. Human societies may have realized via repeated acts of resource extraction and observation that a purposeful resource use entailed the application of one or more sub-processes for improved reclamation of natural resources. Approximately, there were 5 sub-processes that could be applied singly or in combination with others depending upon the specific requirements of the local conditions. These are described taking action to improve resource reclamation while preventing resource waste. The use of methods that permitted the reclamation of a resource that had not yet been made usable. Establishing procedures that made sure certain resources were used in the best possible ways, maximizing their usefulness. Finding more practical substitutes or alternatives for rare and limited resources. Developing procedures and strategies that aided in the processing and reuse of leftover resources and byproducts. These sub-processes mediated the resource use behaviors that human cultures adopted in varying degrees and at various times. Pre-agricultural period. The most important natural resource put to a widespread use by the humans was stone. At a very early stage in the evolution of human societies, the use of stone as a material for shaping some of the basic tools was discovered. Early stone tool societies focused mostly on harvesting fruits and seeds for nourishment and hunting animals. Their tools were of great assistance to the human tribes. Despite being of primitive character, the instruments appeared to function effectively in the circumstances. Large quartzite flakes or bits had been taken from the parent rock and used to build tools. It was often unclear whether this had been accomplished by striking the rock with another stone, which would have required enormous power, or by fire setting, which is when a fire was ignited against the rock, causing big portions to separate from the main body. Quartzite was the main material utilized in the early manufacturing of stone tools. Additionally, it is clear from the process outlined above that reprocessing and reusing waste materials was a frequent sub-process used in tool manufacturing. One theory holds that using a wooden hammer is the only way to separate pebble flakes, in which case the practice of using resources appears to change significantly since its use. The flake using stage of stone tool making was followed by the microlithic tradition. Here the tools were mainly made of blades of stones. These blades were parallel-sided and were prepared from cores. They were attached to wooden pieces in different combinations to make a variety of tools. Clearly, at this stage, the human societies had become conversant with the use of natural resources other than rocks or stones. This other natural resource was wood, and it had begun to be used for more purposes than merely for fuel. The sites using microlithic devices were no more confined to a few places or regions. A wider dispersal of this tradition had taken place as microliths were also found from eastern parts and deep south. Agricultural period. Beginning with settled agriculture, resource use behaviors experienced a substantial change. A definite shift occurs in favor of using soil as a natural resource, and there is also a change in how stone is used to make tools, with a considerably wider variety becoming prominent. Early agricultural practices involved cleaning entire swaths of land of all vegetation and sowing the seeds needed to develop the crops. Agriculture had started to become more confined as a result of the need for an ideal soil deposit in order to cultivate the crop on individual pieces of land. Naturally, areas where new soil deposits would occasionally appear, whether as silts from floods or from decomposing matter, were desired. Human communities now were conscious of a new resource use technology called as soil management. As the path to limitless expansion had started to be traversed, this was also the beginning of a radical shift in how humans used natural resources. Balochistan is where the first agricultural remnants of the Indian subcontinent were found. The communities are modest in size and appear to be concentrated in regions with plenty of good cultivable land. The floods in the two main rivers periodically replenished the soil. Loralai and Zob and the valleys of these rivers were thus available as fertile grounds for practicing agriculture. The adoption of the practice of domesticating animals preceded the beginning of civilized life. Domestication of animals. There is proof that sheep, goats, and oxen were domesticated throughout the early stages of agricultural civilization. We receive more proof of the domestication of ass in the later phase. Clearly, The two main natural resources that were now extensively utilized by human communities were plants that were periodically cultivated from seeds on defined sites and domesticated livestock. The earlier period's lines and stone tools by man also changed as a result of the need for smaller, more functional tools in response to the new demands. The agricultural sites produced tools including spatulas, lunettes, bone awls, lapis lazuli, rubbing or grinding stones, beads made of citetite and frit, as well as blades made from chert, jasper or chalcedony. In addition, earthenware began to appear around this time. This pottery was manufactured by hand and on wheel, and it was ornamented with painted motifs. Other materials like bones, clay and sand were now utilized by man in addition to stones. The scope of resource use practice expanded, and as human civilizations became more complex in structure, a wider range of natural resources began to utilize by these communities. Agriculture's early practice brought up a number of new possibilities. Permanent settlements aided in the development of community life and extended the range of activities in which humans may engage meaningfully. Rapid progress was made as semi-permanent houses were built. Spinning and weaving was practiced, and crops were grown, tended to and harvested, with grain consumed as well as stored as seeds for the following season's agricultural effort. The need to develop agricultural land along alluvial deposits in river basins created floodplains for huge rivers like the Indus and its tributaries, allowing civilization to germinate and flourish. Large civilizations arose in sites like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira and Lothal. These urban centers were almost entirely reliant on the seasonal alluvial deposits of the rivers along which they had grown for agricultural supplies. They had, however, established a number of new resource management strategies. Wheat and barley, as well as leguminous plants, field peas, and dates were among the new crops planted. Sesame and mustard seeds were also used. Therefore, oilseeds became well known. We have evidence of keeping domestic birds in addition to domestic cattle. Cotton was also grown and woven. Cotton clothes were in use. Another notable advancement had occurred in the field of tool making. The earliest usage of metals is most visible. The excavated sites have yielded a variety of copper and bronze tools, along with stone, blades, and metal implements appear to have provided human groups with far better availability in reclaiming natural resources. The use of a very thin drill to perforate tiny beads, as seen in Lothal, is a good illustration of craft skills. The seals from the Harappan sites are also of great interest to us. The seals are available in such plenty that seal making appears to have become an important craft. Lothal's use of a very small drill to perforate tiny pearls is a good example of craft skills. Seals are also plentiful that seals crafting appears to have become an important craft. Their significance was undoubtedly related to their involvement in trading activities, but for the modern observers, the short inscriptions in the unknown Harappan alphabet and the subjects of the intaglio, many of which depict scenes of cultural or religious nature, are of much greater interest. The early copper and bronze using civilization that had held a sway mainly over the northwestern and western region of the Indian subcontinent declined by about 1500 BC. Iron Age and resource utilization. The decline of copper bronze civilizations and the advent of iron using human cultures should not be considered in any specific order. However, knowledge of the utilization of iron changed the situation of human cultures, usage of natural resources nearly radically. Human societies had successfully utilized soil as a resource in the early stages of agricultural development. Natural constraints had limited agricultural progress since, in the lack of a hard material to overturn the crusty upper surface of virgin soil, only soft alluvial soil could be exploited for agriculture. The introduction of iron, especially in the plowsphere, provided man a fresh and new opportunity to work on virgin areas. Consequently, agriculture spread in totally new region that afforded irrigation facilities known as Ganga Yamuna Doab. In the subcontinent, historical development of human societies in Indian agriculture mostly remained the principal natural resource, and the patterns of its use often determined the course of further developments. The Vedic literature is a particularly rich source of knowledge on contemporary societies' resource use habits. It indicates that the variety of crops grown had greatly expanded since it comprised wheat, barley, millet, and rice. These crops were cultivated on newly cleared regions reclaimed from the Ganga and Yamuna plains forests. The utilization of iron made such large-scale cleaning possible. Tin and lead were two more metal resources that had come to light. Cattle keeping had been done on a regular basis. The civilization had grown fairly complex, and a system of specified rules for social interaction and behavior had formed. The importance of iron as a resource had not lessened, and additional opportunities for expansion had been associated with the diverse use of iron. Dear students, the resource use practices, as discussed earlier, illustrate that for a long time human civilization's common perspective of natural resources was that their reserves in nature was unlimited. And so, reclamation of natural resources could be pursued without any real care for their conservation. To be fair to pre-modern societies, it should be noted that their resource use habits were not generally directed towards reckless consumption. Irreparable harm was avoided, and the overall human impact on ecology and the environment was not one of habitat destruction. The resource use practices clearly demonstrate a link between the type of resource consumption and the structure of human communities. With this, we end today's lecture. See you next time. Till then, goodbye and good luck.